All right, so it is now noon. I am very excited. First of all, welcome everybody. I am very excited to be sharing today's information with you and introducing you to our incredible guest speaker. This is the first time that we have had a speaker from Europe come and speak to us and address our clients and our customers in this particular way. I think that this is going to be essential information going forward. I know that we try to talk a lot about these trends that are coming forth within our program, but I think that today's information is going to be essential to safeguard your careers and workforce planning to prepare for what's to come. And today I'm going to introduce you to Ananda Panampalam, and he's from the UK. He's Chief Technology Officer at Green Tech Capital Partners. And I've just asked him to present his perspective on what's to come. Ananda was actually referred to me by one of our lovely clients who participated in an international meetup group for project managers. And she said, you know, Jackie, I really think that you need to hear this guy. His information is very much congruent to what you're trying to teach us. And so I tracked Ananda down. It wasn't easy, but here he is. So we're really excited. So he's also a fellow of the Royal Society for Encouragement of Arts, Manufacturers and Commerce. It's a UK organization, I'm assuming. And he's got a pretty high profile reputation in his industry for being forward-thinking. He's a creative leader and for constantly keeping abreast of current developments in technology, climate change, sustainability, clean tech, and their impact on both our work as well as the way we are going to be living in the future. So it's this genuine interest, passion, and sheer curiosity that he's developed that puts him miles ahead of the curve when it comes to creating a real and disruptive impact within businesses. So closer to home, Ananda, although he is currently living in London, England, he did spend some time at University of Toronto. He's worked in Boston. He's worked pretty much around the world. He's a lifelong learner, and we talk about the importance of learnability in our program. And he's done everything in technology. So, but his favorite thing to do are workshops like this. And on a personal note, I think you were saying, Ananda, that you walk, what, 12K a day? That's pretty impressive.
It's 20, yeah.
But so Green Tech, just to give you guys a little bit of background, because I know that that many of you here are interested in either transitioning or helping the energy sector transition to the clean tech and the renewable sector. Green Tech is an organization based in Germany, actually, that invests in for profit for social good. And so Ananda also takes the role of Chief Technology Officer for a few of his investees. And he's also working on digitizing the investment process. So you can go and look at his LinkedIn profile. I would like to encourage you to connect with him. He's invited me to share that with you. But another reason that I thought it was important that you hear him speak now is because of his knowledge of the energy industry worldwide. And you know, he talks a lot about the future of solar and wind. Once again, you guys, this is his perspective from working around the world in other countries outside of Canada. So take it for what you will. As Ananda is speaking, I want you to please record any questions that you have, and we will be inviting Q&A, live Q&A with Ananda. You'll be welcome to pose those questions at around 1 o'clock. So he's also going to be talking to you about, you know, types of engineering jobs that he sees that are going to be becoming redundant, those that are going to be increasing. And he's also going to be talking about our futures and our future careers, and you know, how it is very likely that we're probably going to have multiple careers. Empathy is going to be incredible. 40s is not, you know, midlife anymore. So these are some of the things that I'm hoping that Ananda will be able to talk about. But most importantly, he's going to talk about the importance of change. And, you know, change is inevitable, and your career has got to change along with it. So you can choose to change or you can choose to retrench. And so Ananda has a some very unique perspectives on that. And he's going to talk to you about the importance of learning. One of the organizations that he worked at mandated 5 hours of learning a week. So I'm curious to know how you spent that time too, Ananda. So Ananda's going to be presenting for about an hour, and then we'll open for Q&A. I want to warn you guys that this is going to be delivered fast, and Ananda is doing this intentionally, and it's supposed to be on exponential thinking and is fast to give you a sense of the speed of the future. So I'm hoping that I presented that correctly, Ananda.
Yeah.
But on that note, I'm going to pass it over to you. So welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us all today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So without further ado, thank you so much. That was very, very generous of you. Very kind words. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. So it's an absolute honor to be presenting today. I have presented to Canadians a few times. So, and also, I don't think Jackie mentioned it, but I'm Canadian as well. So I did high school and university in Toronto. So maybe not as nice as Alberta, but still Canadian. I moved here in 2000, just part of the dot-com boom. So today's presentation is it's an intersection of AI, robots, ethics, human. It's intentionally fast. I'll happily stay as long as you want and answer as many questions as you want. My area of expertise is really like just technology in general, people, anything to do with like geeking out. So let's begin. So I'm guessing a lot of you have kids, nephews, nieces, if you don't have kids. And often, like, I think, my kids, what will they do when they grow up? So they're quite young. What's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years? So when I graduated in 99, there was no iPhone, there was no Apple Store, there was no like Epic Games, entire industries that didn't exist today. So this is a letter that came from my daughter's school, and it actually came from her school. And like, don't read the letter, right? So the key part here is really the statement that 85% of jobs available in 2030, which is like 8 years from now, are yet to be invented. So bear that in mind, right? So we don't know what's coming down the future. Like, we have no idea really. And you can look back to what you studied when you were at university to see what you're doing now, and you can see that a lot of it is likely true as well. The other aspect to think about is we are living longer and much longer. I know COVID has maybe put a little bit of a break to it, but the reality is in the 1970s, the average age was relatively low. If you look at the numbers today, so it's 47 and 59 in India. And if you look at it in 2016, it's 67, 76. In the UK today, the average age is 82. Japan is 84. Canada, I think, is around 82 as well. The US is 79. Don't ask why. So we don't know what kind of jobs are going to be there in the future. We're living longer, working longer, staying in our houses longer, which causes other issues. So bearing that in mind, I'm going to go into what is the future of work. What if I say, if you go into a bar, and this machine actually exists in the UK. So I've actually, not in a bar, but it was in the Barbican. So imagine instead of going to a bar and having a bartender and having a chat, you could basically like order a cocktail. It is made perfectly well every time, and it's made to your specific liking. Imagine you can then create your own cocktail recipes and then get paid every time somebody orders your cocktail. So robotics is around. You have McDonald's in the US is testing out robot making burgers. You've got pizza machines as well. So the mechanization of anything that is done where it's repeated over and over again is happening and is being tested out. Food-wise, let's say, so this is a burger that I had, right? So still sticking with the burger theme. So I was in San Francisco and got exposed to Impossible Burgers. Now, I don't know if you've had it yet. It's available in some countries, not yet in the UK. So effectively what this burger is, it's made from plant food, and they have some way of making that pink, the red. So it cooks like beef, it smells like beef, it tastes like beef. And I was in San Francisco airport with a friend of mine, And we were both like, okay, let's just get a normal burger and we'll get this vegan burger. And what you don't see in this picture is sitting on either side of this burger is our normal burger. And then we had this burger as a, taste test to see, is it going to be any good? As it turns out, it was actually like, probably better than the beef burgers. So as it relates to climate change, as it relates to health, there's something to consider here, right? So plant-based food is coming down the pipe and is actually, this is I don't know if people know, Vinod Khosla was one of the investors in this. So the pitch for this was a guy who basically came and said, I want to change the way animal husbandry works. I'm going to replace it and get rid of it. And Vinod Khosla invested in this. This company is worth about $7 to $8 billion now. Impossible Foods. Imagine now you're at a bar, you're having an Impossible Burger, and you want to watch the news.
Hello, everyone. I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhua's agency. My voice and appearance are modeled on Zhang Zhao, a real anchor with Xinhua. The development of the media industry calls for continuous innovation and deep integration with the international advanced technologies. I will work tirelessly to keep you informed as texts will be typed into my system, uninterrupted. I look forward to bringing you the brand new news experiences.
So imagine instead of having a human anchor or human actors, you have an AI that reads the news for you. But imagine also instead of the news being constantly negative and attention grabbing, you have a dial that could change the news to say, okay, I want roughly 50% good news, and the rest I'm okay to be bombarded with like kind of the random stuff we get hit with today. There are actors in India who've got avatars of themselves that you can interact with. Imagine then you can interact with avatars of people that have passed away. Imagine you can then sell your image and make money from your image as it gets avatars over the internet. So this is happening. This exists. This video is maybe 2 years old. So you're watching the news. You can tune the news. You can basically say, I only want good news. I only want bad news. I want local news. All of it is customizable via an AI. But at what point do you say, is that conscious? What about the ethics of all of it? So I, for example, do one-on-ones with my team. So every week I connect with each member of my team. We talk about them, their family, their lives. And one question that comes to my mind is, at what point does AI become sufficiently human-like that you would want to do one-on-ones, you would want to coach, maybe mentor them, or do you treat them like machines? And where is the line? What about the ethics of all this? So AI is here, and there's a bunch of things around AI to keep an eye on. In terms of food, so we spoke about plant-based food. There's also now a vat-grown food. So you can basically get chicken that's basically grown in a lab. Also beef that's grown in a lab. It costs about $10 a burger at the moment. But imagine it gets half, it halves in price, halves in price, halves in price. Sometime in the next 10 years, I could imagine the price of a vat-grown, lab-grown burger, which is much more carbon neutral friendly, is going to be cheaper than having like industrial scale cow farms that we have today. So how does this happen? So there is a process called precision fermenting, and you could look it up, it exists. You take a drop of blood from any kind of protein, fish, for example, as well, and you put it through a process where you kind of somehow merge it with some yeast, and then you put it in a vat, and then you basically like grow it, and you end up with basically meat, in this case, that is 100% genetically identical to what you had started with. Now, obviously, there's a bit more complications, like you have to make sure there's muscle and it's not like just juice, right? So this costs today about $10 a burger. So what you're probably thinking is that, why do I have a picture of a whiskey bottle? So if we were doing this in person, I would bring, so I have this, can people see the whiskey bottle I'm holding up? Maybe, hopefully. So if we were doing this in person, I would bring the bottle of whiskey you see there on the right. So that's made by a company in the US called Glyph. So they call it molecular whiskey. It's made the exact same way that you see in this picture. So they take a drop of whiskey, it goes through a vat process, and overnight you end up with whatever whiskey you want. And obviously they can customize it as well along the way. So imagine that, so I like whiskey. A Macallan 40 would cost like easily like $250, $400 for a single shot. But imagine you could instead buy this bottle for $35, and it's an exact replica of a Macallan 40. So this happens. So I have it, I've tried it, and I've taste tested it with many people in the UK across many presentations. It's absolutely awesome. So sticking with the whiskey theme, but now we're going to switch from a little bit from food to a little bit of health. So what you see there, the glass you see there on the toilet was me drinking that whiskey actually in San Francisco. So imagine you have a toilet, a smart toilet that can detect cancer at stage 0 and stage 1. This toilet, so you can look up the company, Clinic AI, is in human trials today. And how do we do medicine today, right? The way we do medicine today is, you're fine, you've got some pain, you ignore it, then you have some blood, then you go to the doctor does some tests, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I've got like stage 4, some crazy disease. But imagine instead that you can catch the cancer, bowel cancer, for example, at stage 0, how much intervention you could do as opposed to catching it at stage 4 or 5. So for the question, yes, I think this is being recorded, and I think you have to speak to Jackie about whether it's going to get shared. So what is the future of healthcare, right? What is the future of health? So I believe the future of health is going to be preventative medicine, where we move much more from a reactive, I get sick, I go to the doctor, to I am constantly being monitored by passive systems like my t-shirt or the toilet or something that I'm wearing, like the contact lenses. And it tells me whether I'm sick, what I need to eat, and how I can get better before I get sick. So this is an example, and I'll show a few more examples around this. So here's another example, right? So you could, and this is an article from the Nature Biomedical Engineering 2018. So you can basically go for an eye check. So in the UK, we get an eye check usually every year. And I think in Canada, it's probably very similar, right? And imagine as you go for your Specsavers, right, your eye check, they can tell you your risk of cardiovascular disease. So, and effectively what they do is they scan your eyeball, and then based on some the density of the veins that are in your eyeballs, a piece of AI then predicts whether or not you're at risk. So this is again moving towards instant, non-invasive prediction of preventative of diseases that you could potentially prevent. Another example, there's a selfie. So this is from 2020, and this is also, again, this is the European Heart Journal. So imagine you could take a selfie, and the selfie tells you, hey, you might be, at risk, do something. So imagine it's too late now, right? So you've ignored all the preventative medicine. There, it is possible to actually 3D print organs. I actually met a guy in Germany, in Frankfurt, when I was there a few weeks ago, who is 3D printing liver. He says right now he's been able to, and this is a PhD student working for Siemens, I think, but I forget which company. So he's able to 3D print a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter liver with everything in it, fully functional. And what he's working to as part of his PhD, so his goal for the next 2-3 years is to get like 1/3 of your liver printed, which then you can then, if it's printed with your blood, you can then basically then put it back into your system. And effectively at 1/3 of the size, it could regrow to full size. So this is an article, but I actually met a person who's actually working on this as well in Frankfurt. So this is now moving from preventative to, as the number of accidents go down, you can get your organs printed and replaced with your own blood using 3D printing plus technology. There's another example. So this is now, so the one I showed you before was a mice level heart. So there's also a human level heart, which you can see. This is from Michigan State University. So now you have a heart, you need to get it replaced. So traditionally, and most commonly, like you have a human replace it. So the future of medicine, I think, is also going to be around replacing potentially. So if you're a doctor, it may be you have robots that are controlled by humans and eventually controlled by AI that will do the surgeries for you. So this specific one, so this is November 2020, can make an incision as small as 0.3 millimeters. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if you're going for surgery, do you want this robot that probably has maybe access to the universe of surgeries that have been done, or a doctor who maybe, 40s, 50s, maybe had coffee, maybe had a bad night's sleep last night. So choices that you may have to make in the future. And if you're studying, the thing that goes through my mind when I tell my kids is like, hey, you might not be a doctor, you might be a hardware engineer that makes this machine, or you might be a software engineer that writes the code that runs this machine, or some combination of the two. So here's another cool thing that happened this year. So DeepMind, which is a UK-based company owned by Google now, has basically said they will release every known protein structure publicly. So protein structure, so protein, we're all made of proteins. All humans, all living organisms are made of proteins. The way a protein is folded or the way it's structured dictates how it works. And usually, or historically, it's taken a PhD science as a student, one PhD to work out how one protein works or is folded. Now, what DeepMind has got is they've got an AI that can do it in a few days, effectively. So this, I think, will change medicine for the next 20 years in terms of like, by the end of like next year, we will know how every single protein structure in the world effectively is structured, which would have taken like hundreds of thousands of human years prior to like July 22nd, 2021. So here's another cool thing, super cool thing that happened this year. Sticking with health still, right? So there are some diseases that we have that are incurable historically, however, can be cured with genetic manipulation aimed at a single patient. So this is from last year. So some patient here was blind. They use CRISPR, which is like it's actually quite old. It's got 9-year or 10-year-old technology that has been used to cure genetic blindness. Effectively, it's gone in and it's hacked the person's genes and taken out the genes that's causing it and or put in a gene that's fixing it. So this is curing, which was never possible years ago, about 2 years ago even. So I'm going to switch from health to energy, which maybe is much more interesting or maybe more relevant. So if you're from Alberta, this is probably like, I would guess you're the expert. I'm not the expert, but I love to be challenged. So coal is around, but I have opinions on coal. There's also oil. So what we saw last year in March of 2020, when oil went to negative prices, I think maybe potentially a sign of things to come. I know all the prices right now are quite inflated, but hold on to that thought. So this is coal in the UK. So coal in the UK peaked in the 1900s. So when Trump says he digs coal and he wants coal to be back and coal to be around, and I know I'm being quite glib when I say this, right? Because obviously there's other benefits potentially which we can talk about. Coal, there's maybe 3 coal power plants in the UK. Most of COVID-19, the UK has been running on clean, as in renewable energy, especially like in the summer. So solar and wind powered for like months and months without coal, without natural gas. So the question really is like, why is coal, natural gas potentially dead? So natural gas roughly costs 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and coal as well. And this is a PPA, right? So this is wholesale prices. And if you look at the price of wind, the price of wind is about 4 to 2 cents. So 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. The cheapest I was able to find as a PPA price, unsubsidized, was 2019 Brazil at 2 cents per kilowatt hour. The cheapest I was able to find for solar was in the Middle East, ironically, at 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you look at, I'll show you in a second, right? The price of solar and wind is asymptotically declining. And the question really is, what does that mean? So Shell, as you guys are aware, probably like one of the largest companies in Europe and the world by in the energy sector, has decided basically they're going to basically go down to zero and climate neutral. BP, Chevron, I think they're all heading in that direction. And why, right? Why? So this is why. And this is the Economist. So the line to look at here is the solar line. So right now, So the price I showed you was 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour. Effectively, the price of solar is going to hit 1 or less in the next several years. Cents per kilowatt hour. Coal, as you can see, basically is kind of hovering around 4. Gas, as you can see, is hovering around 5. And then onshore wind is probably going to be around 2 or 3. So why is this happening? So this is happening because like the technology that underpins coal and wind has improved and has exponentially improved. So that red line you see there going from 359 down to 40 in 2019 is solar. And then wind is going down. Now imagine you tack onto this carbon prices, like carbon credit pricing that will happen over the next several years, right? Maybe even out of COP26. The price of coal and gas and basically anything that's considered dirty fuel is going to go up. I know we're kind of in a slightly weird situation right now where a transition period perhaps, right? So what does this mean? So I believe like the future of energy really is nuclear, which I didn't really talk about here, but it's nuclear, it's solar, it's wind, and it's a storage of renewables. And then over time, as carbon prices go up, so carbon prices right now, there's no real international carbon market, there's no standardized carbon pricing, different countries have different prices for carbon. So it's a problem that requires resolution in the next several years, where we need to have international carbon pricing, and it needs to be north of like $50 to $70 per ton. That will completely destroy coal and gas. And as you can see in the UK, it's already, even before those markets exist, it's already destroyed as well. So coal in the UK should stop in the next 3 years by 2025. Now, the reason I say I'm being glib, right, is so like it doesn't require a lot of education to be in the coal sector. So it's mining, it's not high tech, you don't need a super education. But if you want to be in solar or wind or battery, like energy storage of any kind, it requires a significant amount of education. It's going to be pretty hard to retrain potentially, but it might be possible, right? It requires just effort and time and willpower to rescale in those sectors, and it's just something to bear in mind, right? So it's very easy for me to sit here and say, "Hey, listen, coal is dead," but for like parts of society that are not able to retrain, either because they're not able to or because the government doesn't put in enough incentive and enough money into it, it isn't necessarily the good thing. So I'm going to switch from energy to maybe a little bit of transport. So price of battery, price of storage is shrinking. And a relatively obvious statement. So we're going to switch to the car industry, which is also a fascinating topic for me. So this is a Volkswagen GTI, I think. It has about 100,000 parts, camshafts and belts and motors and I don't know, lots of things that can go wrong. And then if we look at an electric car, so an electric car is relatively straightforward. So I drive an electric car now, and then we can talk about specific numbers in electric. Effectively, it's a bed of batteries, and you've got and I used to take apart cars, motor cars, small cars when I was a kid, and had this motor. So basically, this car has like 1 or 2 motors, and probably the most complicated thing on this car is maybe the AB system, the hi-fi system you stick on it. The things that wear down: your tires, your brakes, your wipers, pretty much everything else, more or less. There's no moving parts really, right? And the motors and the batteries in some of these cars are rated for over 100,000 miles. Tesla has, I don't know, like a few thousand cars as taxis in Amsterdam. And they find after 200,000 miles, the battery erosion is maybe like 10 to 15%. And the reality is, how many people really drive 200, 300,000 miles, right? So these cars A, have way less parts, so like 5,000 maybe parts in the supply chain, and then B, last more or less forever. The things that break down usually are the bits that hang off it, not the core of it. So if you're in, and then I mean, this is like late news, right? Like if you're in the combustion car engine industry and you are like the top engineer for combustion cars, unless you reskill in this sector, effectively all investment in combustion engines have stopped. So like in Europe, so in the UK, basically from 2030, any new car that's sold has to be electric. In Europe, I think they're going to be 2035. So the reality is all major car companies have shifted all their investment into electric cars. Now, some of them are basically doing hydrogen as well, right? So which is fine. So it's also clean, but fundamentally is a different kind of battery power, right? So if you're in that sector, something to think about is how do you shift or or adopt other strategies for employment. So why is all this happening now? So Moore's law. So hopefully everyone here knows Moore's law. Go to Moore basically said compute power doubles every 18 to 24 months. So this is held true for forever, basically, since he came up with the idea. So the light blue line is the cost of transistors, and it's a log scale going up and down. Storage has dropped exponentially, and internet connection as well, right? Like I'm here in the UK and I've got like 0.5 terabyte of speed. Now, if you think back to I don't know, when the internet kind of kicked off, we all had Hotmail, we had 2 megs of storage, and then Gmail came out, they offered 1 gig of storage, then they increased it to 5 gig, then 10 gig, then 15 gig. All of that is only possible because of this dark blue line you see here. Same with the Apple iPhones, right? So every time an Apple comes out with a new phone, it's the same price, but it's faster. It has more battery life. It has more storage. It has more compute power. And it's because of this line, or these lines you see here. Sorry, there was a comment. Let me just see what the comment said. According to many white papers, you would need 8x the current generation to move 90% to renewable. Okay, we'll cover that. So here's another example of an exponential decay. So when I was graduating in the 1999, 2000, a friend of mine actually went into this, and it was going to cost $100 million to sequence the genome. So now you can sequence the genome for less than $1,000. You can sequence part of your genome, so like 23andMe, for like $100. So fun fact, which I'm sure probably everyone knows now, is so when the coronavirus came out, the first thing that happened was it was DNA sequenced in a few hours. And then that DNA sequence was sent electronically across the world. And then companies basically had a working prototype of a vaccine within a few days. It went into human trials within 60 days of the DNA being sequenced, without even the virus actually physically arriving. So quite amazing what's happened. An exponential decay through the use of technology. So what's happening, right? So we live in a world where everything was local and linear. So what does that mean? So if somebody here in the UK, in London, wins the election, but somebody in Canada to find the news out pre-telegraph was, you had to wait for a ship to come, right? But now it's instant. So now I'm going to call here. We've got people from the UK. We've got people from Canada. I've got potentially family from Sri Lanka that could join as well, right? So there's no limit to what's happening. So we're in a much more hyper-connected world than we've ever been before. And there's it's instant. We don't realize it. We complain when there's no Wi-Fi. We complain when there's no Wi-Fi on the plane. But just wind back 20 years, it didn't exist. None of this existed. The iPhone didn't exist. But now we complain when things don't work. So we've moved from a world of absolute scarcity and to abundance. Obviously, the abundance isn't evenly distributed. So there's definitely parts of the world where the abundance is not fairly or equally distributed. I quite like this abundance triangle by Peter Diamandis. He's written quite a few books actually. This book is this book is called Abundance, and he talks about if you're in Africa, what are the things? And this is just, I say Africa because it's easy to maybe explain for me, right? If you want people in Africa, which is 1 billion people, to move up the food chain, the basic necessities you got to provide them are water, food, and shelter. If you can provide them with that, then they'll start thinking about, okay, energy, education, and information communication technology. And as there's an abundance of that, then people will start thinking about their health and freedom. So where some parts of Africa are, is they're still in the bottom half of this triangle. And really to move people up the food chain. It's not really giving them money or giving them education. It's really creating an environment where there's an abundance of these items so that they can focus on the things that'll take them to the next level. So some of these things I've spoken about, a little bit of food, a little bit of shelter. Let's keep going, right? So more examples of abundance. So we have 3.5 3.5 billion people online today. So people are probably aware, Starlink, my brother has Starlink. They are going to go live this year in terms of full production from beta. They're also working on moving into Africa as well. So imagine like Starlink is going to be fully online in the next couple of years. Pretty much everyone in the world should have access to the internet. And so the power of this is, are there much, of the 3.5 billion, there's likely people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and, smart people that could exponentially help us out that do not have access to the internet today, right? So it's empowering in terms of like finding talent that we don't have access to today. We're going to have 1 trillion devices connected to the internet by 2035. So this is from The Economist from 2019. We live in a world where, so in 1966, half the world was in extreme poverty. Now we're down to less than 9%. A significant shift of that abundance was created in India and China, really. And Africa is not really that, is better, but not that great. So the average income in Africa is about $2,000 a year per person, which is pretty rough actually, right? We're living longer. So what this graph is a really cool graph. This is from Our World in Data. So in 1851, we had, not many people living to 100. And if you look at 2011, 2021, quite a few people live to 100. So the mode, like not the average age, right? The mode, which is like the most common. So in the US is 87. So today, like 90% of the population kind of lives up to 87. And then imagine like in 10 years, it'll be like 90, then it'll be like 95, then it'll be 100. So really like, which I'll get to in a bit, right? Like, what do you do when you're 100? And what do you do to make sure that you're not working or need to work at 100? So you're going to live a long time, but there's obviously things that kill us. So what are the things that kill us? So the 4 horsemen of death are cardiovascular disease, which is basically so the abundance that we live in, which is lots of food, lots of drinks, no exercise, causes like the first few things you see up there. If you scroll down this list, you'll see the things that hit the news, right? Natural disasters, terrorism, are the things that we see in the news. But the reality is and suicide is halfway up this list. More than halfway up the list is suicide. So things that actually kill us are cancers, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, dementia is becoming a huge problem, especially as we live longer. So a lot of these diseases are caused by unhealthy habits. We eat shit. We don't eat well. We don't exercise. We live with chemicals all around us. We wash our clothes and hair with chemicals, and wonder why we get cancer. And why is all this happening now? So I've spoken about some of these. I haven't gone through all of it. There's a ton of material on this stuff on the web. If people need like sources, I'm happy to give sources. So I'm going to shift from this to a little bit of potentially the downsides of technology, which, the good comes with the bad, as always. So here's a little video.
I almost got into an accident right there.
So I was informed that no humans were harmed in the filming of these videos. So what's happening here is to all these cars are Teslas. All these videos are old. They're all 2016, 2017. And what a Tesla from 5 years ago is able to do is it is faster than a human and is able to say, hey, I think there's going to be an accident. Now, it beeps and then people stop and then effectively, okay, fine. The Tesla itself and the people in the Tesla are okay. But imagine this technology today. Imagine this technology in every car in the world in the next few years. Imagine even if it only has the basics, right? Like the car in front of me is about to slow down or is slowing down. You're going to hit the car, so I'm going to stop you from hitting the car. That would reduce road accidents by a good 60, 70% easily, if not more. So the number of people that die in accidents every year is 1.5 mil. the number of people who get injured in accidents every year is 4.5 mil. Now imagine we take that number down to zero, both numbers down to zero, through just an application of this technology, right? The car in front of you is gonna, is doing something stupid. We're gonna stop your car, and every car has that technology. So the consequences of that. So what happens to insurance? What happens to organ donors? What happens to like all the people who physiotherapy, chiropractors, car mechanic shops? Is it possible that the GDP of countries, and it's highly likely that as this technology gets widely adopted, that the GDP of countries that rely on car accidents will shrink the GDP? And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Who knows, right? So so this is a bit dark, so just bear with me. But it's good to know that there's other things that are possible: the good, the bad, and the ugly.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
So I've had this asked a few times. So just so people are aware, this is 100% fake video. This is a deep fake, and if you haven't seen it, you should search deep fakes, and you'll find hundreds of videos on YouTube now. It actually is relatively easy to create a deep fake. You can overlay somebody's image on it. You can overlay a voice. You can remove people from an image. So something to think about for yourself and for your kids is, in this age of deep fakes, which is extremely believable, how do you get valid news sources? So I pay for like 2 news sources. So I pay for the BBC, which is a tax thing we have here in the UK. I pay for the Financial Times, and I pay for the Economist. So hopefully those 3, give me some reasonable news. This is India. So cars obviously have been massively awesome to India because it's allowed people mobility, but clearly it comes with its own set of issues, like pollution and lots of like, I have friends of mine who their kids, and when they go there, the kids basically get sick and they cannot like survive in this weather. So they come live in the UK, or they have to live outside of India, outside of like core Delhi, core Bangalore. The solution to this is clearly like clean tech, right? So hopefully, I don't know when, but hopefully, China has this thing called a FICO score. So it's not China-wide. It's by city. Different companies have different ways, and really you get a score based on your contribution to society, whether you follow the rules, whether you support the president, and based on that score, there are things you can and cannot do. Like travel first class, travel second class, travel third class. This is like an episode of Black Mirror. Then you have genetic editing. There's some pretty cool things here, right? So you can, and I'm not saying this is good, but you can select, let's say you have do IVF, you can basically introspect the genes of the fertilized egg. And then you can basically say, okay, I want male, blue eyes, blonde hair, tall, athletic. Or you want somebody like Michael Phelps. So you can basically like profile a gene and then specify the kind of baby you want to have. So not quite designer babies, but obviously but selective, genetic selection, so to speak. So this test costs $200 in the US and has been done over 1 million times as of this year. You can also take 2 male lines, flick a gene out, and then have an offspring that is a male offspring. So that's been done in mice for the last 10 years, but maybe possibly in humans, but we don't know. You could do the same with females. So take two female lines, flick the gene on one of them, and have an offspring. There is a real lives case in China where a doctor flicked the genes of two females, and they are alive. And we don't know the names because he hasn't published the names. He claims that he made them HIV resistant, but the reality is, like, we don't really fully understand the implications. And one of the things around the genes that he's flicked is it potentially also increases intelligence. So he has introduced into society what has been, like, so far been banned. I'm sure there's other examples that we're not aware of. So this is happening and it's real. It's a massive ethical question. And imagine you could, for $5,000, like, say, okay, I'll take this baby, I'll add this thing, I'll take out this thing, and I'll make them smarter, stronger, and more disease resistant, and it costs $5,000. Would you do it? Okay, you say no, I won't do it. But what if everyone else is doing it? Then would you do it? So, anyways, something to think about. So, what is the greatest global challenge? So, obviously, we had COP26 this week. I was lucky; I was actually at a panel last week. So, I'm not going to talk about climate change. So, I personally believe climate change is clearly a huge problem. I also believe polarization and rising inequality are massive problems. So, I'll give an example. So, this is the global wealth pyramid. So probably everyone in this call sits in that little nice pink triangle at the top, and everyone else sits in the triangles below. If you add the first two slices of this pyramid, it's 84%. So 84% of the wealth sits with 100% guaranteed. Everyone on this call is in the first two triangles, right? First two slices. So that's $100,000 plus. Africa, and a lot of people in Africa, India, China, are in the bottom half. So when I say wealth divide, so we live in so there's a guy called Hans Rosling who wrote a book called Factfulness. He's got videos on YouTube. So we live in a much better world for sure, right? So there's a lot of abundance, child mortality is down, we're living longer, but the reality is all those positive things, plus we have a massive wealth divide, which obviously you can see with Zuckerberg and Bezos and all these guys who are multi-billionaires. So this is a huge problem. I think polarization is another one. Climate change, if you don't know, we are at 428 parts per million as of today. At the rate we're growing, we're going to hit 450 by 2030. And what the scientists are saying is, at that point, we're going to be north of 2 degrees Celsius average increase globally. Enough on climate change. So what, right? So we all tend to underestimate technology, the rate of change, and the rate of adoption, because we think linearly. So this is my wordiest slide, and I apologize, but it's a very cool concept. This could be an entire presentation on its own. So there's a topic called singularity. So I'm going to go bottom up. So singularity, as defined by the Economist, is like Skynet, Terminator, as you've seen, hopefully as you've seen. Singularity, as defined by Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurologist, is at the point where we have AI that is smarter than all human beings combined. So he predicts that'll happen by 2045. He also predicts by 2029, which is in the next 8 years, we'll have human level intelligence. Right now, we have insect level intelligence in AI, so exponentially growing to human level within the next 10 years. And this is he's got a really good book called The Singularity is Near, if people want to read him. He's alive, and like he's some kind of crazy genius. He's very good. So we tend to think linearly. So we walk, let's say, a mile or a kilometer in 10 minutes. So we think 100 kilometers will take us 100 minutes. Now, or is that right? No, 10 kilometers will take us 100 minutes. Sorry, poor maths. Now, the reality is anything that's in the computer, right? So like DNA or data or your internet bandwidth, or like Siri, for example, grows exponentially. So what does that mean? Exponentially, basically, a very simple way of looking at it is, in 10 years, it'll be 1,000 times better. That's roughly what exponential means. If it's doubling every year, in 10 years, it's 1,000 times faster, 1,000 times better. So because it's hard for us to imagine what does 1,000 times mean, right? So just, this is kind of, I don't know, this is how I think about it. If we tend to think linearly, but we need to start thinking exponentially. So summarizing, right, to wrap. So I do think we're going to live a long time. 100, 120, there's a really cool concept called longevity escape velocity that people can look up. Now, what that says is if you live to roughly 2040, for every year you live, you'll gain a year and a month. And so what that translates to is, if I can survive to 2040, then I could more or less live forever. Now, whether or not you should is a different question. So, summary, we live in a world of abundance. We spoke a little bit about the future of food, which could be plant-based. The future of energy 100% includes storage. Without storage, it's impossible. I didn't really speak about, like, there's a section I have on water, but to keep it tight, I didn't. But there's like all kinds of technology around water storage, water cleansing, 3D printed houses as well. We should think linearly, especially when it comes to technology. The future of medicine is going to be preventative and maybe even 3D printed hearts, which would be super cool. There's DNA and DNA hacking. So that's an entire topic which I didn't cover, but like I spoke a little bit about DNA, but if you look up biohacking or DNA hacking, there's all kinds of crazy stuff on YouTube and Netflix. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's very cool. Technology can be used for evil as well. We should have all bought it. I've been doing this presentation for now a good 4 or 5 years, and I used to tell people, like, don't buy a Tesla, buy Tesla shares. And you know what? They should have bought Tesla shares. There's a whole bunch of science around exploring space, which I didn't cover. I spoke about energy, right? The future of energy is definitely going to be solar and wind. For the price, just pure economics, they will dictate that. Ethics will be a big topic. So I didn't cover this. So there's a show in the UK called Humans. So human-like robots is also a massive research topic. Then there's gut bacteria. And so there's a entire science around gut and gut health and how that could also increase longevity and general well-being as well. There's immunotherapy, which we spoke a bit about. And then there's transhumanism. Part one of it is your phone, but obviously there's like companies that are working on connecting devices directly to you. So right now our bandwidth is limited by how fast we can absorb information and convey information. But imagine you were hardwired to a computer, potentially how much more information you could go back and forth between you and the computer. So various topics, some of which I've covered, some I didn't have time for, so apologize. So technology, right? Is it good or bad? So technology is here to stay, and technology has always historically been like it liberates resources. It makes scarce resources available abundantly. And hopefully I've given a bunch of examples of that. Is it good or bad? I think it's neither here nor there, right? It comes with good, it comes with bad. And the solution, I guess because I'm a technologist, I tend to believe like the solution to most problems are more technology, which I'm sure people may disagree with. So what is the future of work? So in this context, given this context, I sit in this camp, which is I believe the purpose of business is to serve society. There is a Milton Friedman a thesis that he wrote ages ago in the 70s, where he basically said the purpose of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value or maximize profit. So I definitely do not sit in that camp. So I think we should be looking at a multi-stakeholder environment where we think about our customers, our employees, our suppliers, the communities in which we work, and also generate long-term value for shareholders, which is complicated given the way the stock market rewards people and the way CEOs are rewarded. But this is definitely like the kind of company I would want to work for, and I work for. The kind of mindset I've been driving with my teams, servant leader mindset, empowerment, autonomy, and alignment, right? Like you can't really, I don't think with today's young workforce, you can dictate, hey, do this, you have no choice. If you say that, people just leave. bringing like respect, dignity, and inclusion into every discussion, every meeting, core value of the organization. Be better today than yesterday is around learning and always improving, always innovating. If you're standing still, you're out of date, done. And then having a transformative purpose, MTP, as I forget who calls it, that's from somewhere, Salim. So being driven by more than money. And I think you'll find, I find like when I deal with young kids today, like money, of course they want to get paid, right? But if you just talk to them about, okay, I'm going to pay you a lot of money, they're not that interested. I couldn't really tell you why. And using data-driven decisions. So what are the things I talk to my teams about? I talk to my teams about physical health. Like, what do you need to do today so that as your body degrades, it gracefully degrades? So at 100, you could still do the things you want to do, like tie your shoelaces, up and down the stairs, putting your suitcase into a spaceship that's going to Mars. Like I've got my Mars t-shirt on. Financial freedom. So we kind of live to around 80, right? Like, well, people think we live to 80 today, but imagine you're going to live to 120. What do you need to do from a financial perspective so that you are financially free and not having to work at 70 or 80 or 90? I mean, you could work if you wanted to, but you don't have to work. And so these are all things I teach my teams. Learning. So this is part of what I think you're here for, right? Is like learning is like an absolute must. Like anything that I learned at university, I mean, all of it was very good, but none of it is relevant anymore because we live in a world where everything has been overtaken by a new technology. Mind, so quality of mind, right? So what do I mean by this? So we live in a world that's hyper-connected. You know, there's WhatsApps, there's like all these social media. We used to travel loads. So what do you do from a mental perspective so that as you get older, you're still able to critically perform, critically think, like same with your body, right? Like you don't want to, my personal preference is like, you know, you live a long time and then you die, as opposed to live a long time. And really what happens is you degrade into public health care and then they keep you alive for another 20, 30 years. And the last 20, 30 years are not that great. So what are the things you could do from a mental perspective to keep sharp? And impact. So what is the impact you want to have on your friends, on your family, on your society, on your work colleagues, on your neighborhood? And so these are the 5 things I cover with my team always. And I frame everything around, you're going to live a long time. So think about all these things because these are all relevant now, tomorrow, 20 years from now. From a work perspective, we focus on these 4 things. So results, relationships, Kaizen, and learning. So getting things done at quality, at pace. People, right? People is important always. And the Kaizen is around continuous improvement and innovation. And the learning is sharing and continuous learning and sharing. So I'm quite big on our own potential. I know we have AI and we have robots and we have all this mechanization of labor, but still, right? What will these kids do when they grow up? So these are my kids. So on the left is Eleni, who's 15 now, and the right is Ishan, who is 13. And they know they're in this presentation and they absolutely detest that they're in this presentation, but I love it. So I tell the kids, you know, be curious, adopt a learning mindset. Don't let the schools kill your creativity, which they tend to do quite often. And I actually like talk to the kids about impact and what is the impact they want to have as opposed to, you know, go to school and go do a good job. And the reality is like, I don't even know if they're going to go to university, right? Like, I actually think university degrees are, I know I have a degree, but I think they're quite overrated. So I tell the kids, right, this is kind of what I kind of try and, with my kids anyway, you know, how do you create more abundant futures for everyone, not just for the 1% or the 2%? And what are you going to do for like, from an impact perspective, right? Like, it's not just, you know, me. It's like, how do you give and how do you give back more than you get? And I always ask this to the kids, which they absolutely detest, but I think is a brilliant statement, which is, how will you positively impact 1 billion people? This is what I tell the kids. And this is what I ask my people as well at work. And with that, I'm going to pause. and open the floor for any questions, comments, observations.
Thank you so much, Ananda. I think you've pretty much left a lot of us breathless. Can we just open the floor to questions that you have? Because I'm sure that there's some burning issues on your mind.
Can I go
Yeah.
for a question?
Sure,
Of course.
go for it.
Hi, Ananda. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's really good, the good information there. I have to feedback, like one of the issues that I am scared about. It's a fake news, because it's divide us more than unite us. So I feel more with this social media and things like that. That will we be feed with more fake news than the real news, and it's become very problematic. The other thing, so I saw like the Tesla things, and I was thinking if it's in Casablanca or New Delhi, the car will not move, will stop, because with too many, like how the computer will think, driving in Casablanca or Cairo, maybe the car will not even start. And one thing that I said to my kids, it's learn communication. The communication is very important, because you can have a bright mind and good ideas, but if you cannot communicate them well for people to understand, it's like you have no idea. I mean, it's lost thought or lost good idea. So now that I have that's just my 2 cents thought. So I just have 2 questions. The first one, so you said that's 85% in 2030. We don't know which job will be there. So how we can get prepared for that? That's one question. And the second question about renewable energy. I know that Europe, they are trying to go to renewable energy for political reason with Russia and things like that. But my question is the renewable energy enough to cover the growth and things like that? And that's the question that I have for renewable energy. Do we have enough renewable energy that cover the need for the entire population? Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. So let me start with the second question. So we don't at the moment, for sure, like as evidenced by all the crazy prices that we see in Europe and maybe the US as well. But the economics, the numbers dictate that it will happen, right? Because if you own a coal power plant and you can only sell at 6 cents per kilowatt hour, if you're a CEO, I would be thinking, hey, listen, I should really just shut this down and start up a whole solar farm instead, because if other people are doing it and they're selling power at 1 cent per kilowatt hour, no one's going to buy from me, right? So the economics really dictate that it will head towards wind and solar and storage, and probably like nuclear. So the storage is key. Without storage, you can't really do anything, because obviously the sun is not out all the time and wind is not always blowing. So you'll have nuclear, solar, wind, and storage. And it's just, and it's not, and it's just like looking at the numbers, right? Like that's looking at the price. Because, why would you pay 6 cents per kilowatt hour when you can just go here and pay 1? So it doesn't exist today in scale. I agree. So it requires investment. It requires companies to shift. Carbon pricing will obviously make it faster. It'll take time, right? That's my view. I don't think they're doing it for political reasons. They're doing it because it's cheaper. Now, politics plays a part, obviously, because Russia, and fine, but really it's just cheaper, right? Like, why would you pay more when you can pay less? So the other question you asked was around jobs in 2030. So my view on jobs is very much like attack versus defense. So the defense or the moat strategy is like, I'm going to dig my heels in and like be a specialist in what I know, like combustion engines, because combustion engine cars will exist in 20 years. It just be the old tech. So you could play like a moat strategy and dig in, or the attack strategy is, okay, what's coming up next? So you have hydrogen cars, you have electric cars, and shift into that space. So my mindset has always been, and so there's 5 hours, the thing that Jackie said, right? So it wasn't like the company told us to do it. It was me telling my team that they had to do 5 hours a day, a week. So I mandated it, and then now it's mandated at the company. And so you can either gamble and say, I'm going to go learn cloud. You can gamble and say, I'm going to learn cybersecurity, because that'll always be around. You can gamble and say, I'm going to go crypto. But I think as long as you're learning something new, there's no downside. And the reality is we don't know what's going to be around, right? So those are my two strategies, which is you can play moat or you can do attack. Attack for me is my preferred. And attack basically means, I don't mean attack in the war sense, but like learning new things is what I mean.
So Ananda, I have a question for you. One of your slides, you said, be the change that you want to see in the world, or something along that line.
Correct. Yeah.
What advice would you have for people watching this, all of whom are professionals, many of whom are in career transition? How would you advise them to become the change that they want to see, assuming that some of these exponential developments are going to become a reality? How would you advise them to assist with the transitioning of, say, an economy, given the number of, say, geopolitical barriers and, naysayers that are out there? I know that in Alberta, for instance, and I would love to hear from maybe somebody like you, Paul Delarusso, would say that, oh, it's not going to happen. And for whatever reason, there are multiple camps championing sticking to the current ways of doing things and fueling our vehicles and things like that.
So to be the change, right? Like, I think it just requires, I know it sounds easy, but like it does require courage. Because so me, for example, I could have stayed where I was at Sapient and carried on, working in financial services. But I decided I'm going to leave that and then focus on join a startup, and focus on Africa and try and drive change and reduce, like, let's say, inequality, right? Which is what I'm trying to do in Africa, right? So it does require courage. It requires a leap of faith and sometimes a bit of luck as well. It's very easy to stay where you are, and it's very easy to play defense. It's much harder to be like, okay, I'm going to try and do something different. But it is, so from a fiscal perspective, really, like the way I have done it is, so I'm not financially free. I still need to work. I have a mortgage. I've got kids. But the way I've set myself up is I've reduced my cash flow. I've got like 6 months of cash in the bank. So if this thing at Green Tech doesn't work out, I've got a backup plan. I'll basically find another job, right? So like fiscally, I've set myself up so that I can have a runway that lets me experiment.
Are you saying that a little bit of a financial cushion is required in order to have this courage or to enable somebody to take that leap of faith?
Depends on where you are in your life stage, right? So if you're young, no, you don't have kids, you're not married, then no, right? Like maybe like 1 month, 2 months is enough. But if you're married with a mortgage, with kids, like the runway I would recommend is like 6 to 9 months. So you have no job, then you have 6 to 9 months to find a job. So if you have that runway, then which means like save up, cut your spending, and have that in the bank, and then try something different, right? Now that's what I mean. I'm not saying that's the only option, but that's what I did in terms of like when I shifted, right? So so I have a backup I can fall back to. For the naysayers, I would like you to like think about the Luddites. So this is a very specific story. So I went to visit like one of those weaving factories in the middle of the UK, where they had human labor, and they would weave with cotton or whatever, like textile. And there actually was a Luddite family that basically refused to learn how to operate machines because they wanted to do it manually. And so the term Luddite actually comes from this family that refused to adopt technology for whatever reason. And the reality is, if you don't adopt, I personally believe, right? If you decide you're going to dig in, you'll just be left behind. And you can look at example after example after example, right? Like, I'm a horse driver, I'm not going to learn how to drive a car. Okay, good luck.
And how do you convince them? Because, so as an example, I look back at 2015 in Alberta, for instance, and that's when we started to see this whole paradigm shift happen with, commodity prices decreasing, mass layoffs starting to occur in our energy sector, pipeline access getting blocked. And there were so many people that just stuck their heels in saying, you know what, I'm going to get my old job back, and I don't care what anyone says. I'm just going to wait it out. And like, do you just wait for those people to go bankrupt or die or whatever in order to sort of wake them up? Or, you know, is there a more delicate way that we can start waking up the masses to be more open to change? Because change is a very scary thing for a lot of people.
Yeah. I don't know, right? It's got to be like something education related, like showing people examples of what's happened in the past. And there's hundreds of examples where people have held fast in our lifetimes, right? Like look at Kodak, look at BlackBerry, which is a famous Canadian company, right? Like there's all the Nortel, right? Like, so all these companies have said, okay, I am not going to change. I'm going to stay with what I do because it's my core business. Look at Microsoft with Bill Gates, not Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, right? So he basically ran the company to the ground, and until Satya Nadella took over, they were screwed, right? So, you know, are they showing examples, education? Change is hard, and I'm having this mindset of adaptability and adapting and learning. Letting go of the past, it's I know it's easy for me to say because I don't hang. I obviously throw everything out all the time. I have a new Wi-Fi system with
You said something really important, Ananda, educate. So is that something that you would recommend we incorporate into our daily lives, not just learning, but passing along that learning, sharing that learning with our networks, with our colleagues?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I talk to like anyone who wants to talk to me about money. I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't give financial advice, but anyone, I can tell anyone how, like, who's making, if you're making like 60, 70K a year, I can tell you how to make $1 million. And I don't mean like gambling and crypto and shit, right? Like just very standard, like how to save money in tax shelters and make money, right? But like, yeah, share
a lot of inquiries after this webinar. Just
so I call it like learning and sharing in my thing, right? So it's like learning is good, but like learning and sharing is key, right? Because then you amplify the impact you can have. I think Bill's had his hand up for a while. Bill, did you want to ask?
Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, my question was also around change. Your presentation was fascinating, by the way, and one of the things that really struck me is the great thing about the higher landing program is it really draws out what you really like about what you do. And the one thing that's come to light for me is a real engagement with change, right? Like enjoying the challenges. But I feel like a toddler after listening to your presentation. I mean, my perspective has always been on the enterprise level, right? And what you're talking about is you're talking about societal change to a huge degree, and you've touched on it a couple times, but this isn't going to be a generation. This is going to be a multi-generational acceptance, right? People do fear. I mean, Jackie mentioned people fear change. Transformative change does crazy things to people's minds, and you can see a little bit of that happening to people in the last couple of years, the way they've reacted to the new technology, even through of vaccinations. And I don't want to get into a debate about that, but it is a new technology that people don't fully understand. And that's gonna, as you're saying, it's gonna be exponential, right? So I guess, like, do you perceive that the way we educate our youth is sort of going to have to be the underlying foundation to accept all this change?
It's I mean, the UK, it's already happening. So in the UK, the education system, at least for my kids, 15 and 13, right? So they're definitely shifting to a mindset of continuous learning for sure. Like all the schools
in North America, like even in Alberta right now, we're going through a curriculum change, and there is nothing in North America that typically or generally in North American education that deals with these concepts, right? It's all very superficial. And even last night, you know, as an example, I was talking to my 20-year-old son. He's in school, and he's going to be moving in with a friend, and there's no preparation aside from what you do as parents. There's no preparation of youth in education for the things that they have to do or that they'll be facing, right? So anyway,
100%. Yeah. It's true. It's true. Like the school system does not prepare, I don't think, adequately kids for like really what they're stepping into. They have no idea what they're stepping into. It's going to be interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
All right, so we have there's a question on here, and then maybe Afsan and Paul.
Hi, Afshan here. My question, because you're looking into tech and I've taken some Python courses and AI, etc., as a personal interest, my question for you is, in Alberta and in Canada as well, taking some of those courses is not considered enough. Companies are expecting you to have a bachelor's or a master's with 20 years of experience before you apply for some of those positions. Are you seeing that reflected in Europe as well? Or if you've taken a few courses, you're willing to do the legwork, you know, go through GitHub, learn some skills. Are companies willing to give people opportunities, even at starting positions for that?
So it depends on the person. I think some people, yes, 100%. But some like traditional corporates, probably not. So like for example, like when I'm looking to hire, I'm not. So I look at the degree, but like I always say, what have you learned in the last five years? And if you have a lateral degree and you want to get into software engineering, I'll take you on. But is it common? I would say probably not. It needs to be more common because we need more engineers, really, right? Like, especially software engineers.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to get the feel from the other side of the pond.
Yeah. It's because we have like old people running some of these big companies. It's just, some of them are okay, but some of them are not. Like, it's just.
Ananda, I've got a relevant follow-up question to Afshan's. Sure. With respect to further education, I know that you had mentioned your opinion on university education, university degrees being somewhat overrated. What would be the options for, you know, if you take some of this group, for instance, a lot of whom have they're professional engineers from mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, petroleum engineering. If they were to upskill into whether it's something data related or something different, what are you recommending to this demographic? Are you recommending that they go back to school at the age of 40 and take a university degree or something else? What are your thoughts there?
So two options. So one is if you're 40, right? And the reality is, if you're going to live to 120, you have like 2/3 of your life in front of you. So you could go back and get another degree. And I know many people actually who have, and in their 60s, got another degree. So that's definitely an option. It's just when you then go back into the workforce, you may start off at a different price point, right? So your salary may not be as high. So can your like mortgage kids handle it? Is something to consider. The second option is potentially within the company you're in, can you then stay at that salary, reskill, and then jump? Is the other option. Or stay. Obviously, you don't have to jump, but you could stay, right? So a lot of companies now, at least in the UK, have caught on that they have to like train their people or they're screwed anyway. So in the UK, in most companies, you can basically like get any degree you want. Like you can basically get Udacity, Udemy, Coursera, all paid for. It's almost like a benefit that kind of, I don't know, it's for the last 4 or 5 years I've seen it happen, right? So you could basically like stay where you are, reskill, and then do the job where you are, or just find another job.
And how much emphasis is being put on where these courses, this micro-credentialing has been taken? Does it matter?
Udemy, Udacity, Coursera, Amazon certs, Google certs, Microsoft certs. So those are like kind of your main ones in my sector anyway, right? So those are the main ones, right? So like if you have any one of those, like you will get hunted on LinkedIn.
Paul? I think Paul, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Was a really, I guess, a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. I want to get back to the energy side of it again, because that's my area. I mean, I'm an ex-oil and gas worker, 21 years in the business, and I guess I call it the event when I was removed from the industry. I learned. It took me a while to understand exactly what I wanted to do, and I focus now on learning and taking courses on renewable energy, and it's quite intriguing. So, my question to you, and maybe I have a couple of questions, is what do you see as, I guess, some of the game changers, especially in solar PV, because that's probably one of the more active areas of solar energy. I know CSP is another area, but I don't think it's as popular as the solar panels. And then in the wind technology, what do you see as game changers, or where you're researching at as those two technologies? I know that you saw the costs go down, and that's attractive for investors, but also the harnessing power of those technologies. Where do you see those two areas changing dramatically? Is it solar panel efficiency, and then the wind turbines? Exactly what do you guys see?
So on solar panels would be, okay, so I'm not like a specialist, right? So we're going to keep in mind, I'm not a specialist in this, right? So what I see happening is materials. So there's newer materials that are in play that capture a lot more so efficiently solar power. They're lighter, they last longer, and they're much more, right? So the energy conversion is much higher. On wind, what I'm seeing, and I actually invested in like this random company that's doing marine power. So on wind, what I'm seeing is you have much larger wind, the blades being 3D printed. So 3D printing is affecting it massively. And then offshore, so like deep offshore, so not near offshore where they have to be mounted, but like deep offshore where you have a lot more wind and then no one really cares because it's so far offshore, it's not in my backyard. So they have these like floating rigs that then produce wind. And I've seen more and more of those being deployed. With solar, the other thing I'm seeing as well is like, so using solar for energy storage. So using solar power to like have different types of energy storage. Some of them is like molten salt, for example, right? So imagine like using like the sun to heat salt to a certain point where it melts and it stores heat energy in some efficient way. And you can use that to then drive steam to produce energy at night. So all that stuff is kicking around. So like in renewables, if you're going to stay in renewables, I think it's like you've got kind of like production, you've got storage, and you've got distribution. And so all three are like things to consider. And they're all kind of specialisms on their own right. And to hit like to basically get rid of like coal and gas, like storage is probably going to be one of the biggest growing sectors, like energy storage for grid usage.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. Interesting comment on the storage, because I know that seems to be one of the maybe a bit of a roadblock on solar, because you said the wind doesn't always shine, or the sun doesn't always shine, and the wind doesn't always blow. So in order to kind of balance that ripple of availability of energy when the load is there on the system, you need that storage aspect. And I know that tends to drive the cost because I think some of those costs that you were showing of going down, I'm not sure if they include storage or not. And I think that's one of those key things is the storage aspect, because right now everyone talks about battery, but in Canada we do have a lot of hydroelectric, and that's something that you see a lot of storage, like filling up reservoirs and using the potential energy from a stored water into that. And that's, I guess, an advantage that Canada has in many provinces here. Getting to that, I guess, just another question. Alberta is oil and gas. We've been oil and gas for a very long time. We are moving a lot into renewables and hats off to Alberta because I believe we're going to be off coal here by 2023. So sooner than the UK. So right, that's the prediction so far, right? Natural gas plays a big factor in our energy grid on applying energy. Where do you see natural gas and carbon storage and utilization aspect of it? Because we sit on an abundance of that in this province. And where do you see the utilization? And then I like your interesting comment about nuclear making a comeback. And where do you see Canada helping on the nuclear aspect? So those two questions, and I won't steal the floor anymore.
So let's go back to on the storage front, right?
Yeah.
So wholesale, like gigawatt, hundreds of gigawatt storage and retrieval is about 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So the reality is, with wind or solar, it's still cheaper than like gas and coal, even with storage included. So then you mentioned natural gas. So natural gas, it'll be around, but like in my mind, the economics dictate it has to be. It'll go bankrupt, right? Like I don't think at some point the economics of solar and wind will take off to the point where it will make no economic sense, because why would you pay 6 cents per kilowatt hour wholesale when you can get it for like 1 or 2 cents?
True.
So it'll okay, fine. So those companies will obviously like invest and try and make it efficient, and it'll go from 6 to 5, and fine, it'll be a bit cheaper, right? And maybe they'll add carbon storage to it, so carbon extract, so that it's cleaner, but that costs money, right? So it's not going to be cheaper, it's going to go up in price. And as carbon prices go up, and they'll go up to like over 50 in the next 5 years, right? 50 per kiloton.
And we'll pay for that. We pay for that as the end user, right? So,
but then you can switch. But if you, so I've been on like clean energy for the last 5-6 years, and so yeah, and it's comparable. Like the price is like comparable, if not cheaper than gas and coal, right? So if you're on clean power, then why would you pay for it?
Exactly.
Right. So in theory, you shouldn't get that markup, right? And the third thing you said, what was
your nuclear. Yeah, I think you were talking about nuclear.
Nuclear, yeah. So nuclear will have to be like done at a federal level, right? So the government has to decide as a policy level they're going to go back in. So type 4 reactors. So if you look up TerraPower, so they're SMR, small modular reactors, are huge, as in they're smaller, they're self-contained. Like you basically, they come in a truck size, you park it, it produces 50 megawatts for like the next 50 years. It doesn't require any maintenance. It self-shuts down. So that technology is what's being worked on from a nuclear perspective. And it's cheaper, right? Because you don't have to build like these massive mega factories anymore. You basically have much smaller reactors. So I think the UK is going to start experimenting with those over the next next 10 years, because the UK has by law committed to being green or climate neutral by 2050. So we have like a 30-year runway to like clean up all sectors basically. So energy, and like without nuclear, it's not possible, right? Like, otherwise you're gonna end up paying an arm and a leg for like gas, and not gas, like storage, and it's just the economics don't really add up. How much storage are you gonna really have, right?
We have to, I guess, find better ways to deal with nuclear waste, as which is always the thing that people talk about, right? Because there was always that question: how do people see nuclear green? But there isn't really no emissions from nuclear from the production of electricity, but you have to deal with the waste aspect, which is now is a issue of security. And
so if you look up TerraPower, so TerraPower, their claim is they consume the nuclear waste. I don't know. So there's a question here. Let me go back to the chat, right? So Patrick's basically saying, so you're basically like building a portfolio of 5%, right? So that's a good idea. You can use HackerRank as well to basically bring up your hacker points. HackerRank, Quarterbyte. And so if you basically like code on those platforms, you basically get ranked. Kaggle is another one. So if you're doing AI and machine learning, go on Kaggle, enter competitions, get yourself in the top 100, and you get a job. Albert B has a question around how do you see the impact of policies to accelerate the paradigm of moving to green energies? You need power. You basically need all sectors to participate. You need basically public sector, private sector, individuals, entrepreneurs. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen, really, right? I mean, we can do our part, but all sectors need to participate. Sarah, you're on.
So with the electric cars and everything, I have a few friends that have Teslas. So their biggest problem is the car batteries aren't made to last in our harsh weathers. They find that they drain a lot faster. Have you seen in any of your research that they're trying to come up with a way to deal with that because of the draining problems in the harsh weathers? I find that those batteries are mostly made for more temperature consistent environments.
Right. So, so my brother-in-law in Toronto has a Tesla and has had a Tesla for the last 3, maybe 4 years.
They don't really have very, very harsh weather there, though. I will give you this. I grew up in Kitchener-Waterloo, so I know for a fact it's not as cold as Alberta. Up here. You get minus 42s out here in Alberta. And in Toronto, you're lucky if you can get minus 35. They only have cold snaps for a little bit. We have really long cold snaps out here.
Right. So I don't know specifics. I do know like Norway, for example, is like effectively their number one selling car is electric. They're 98% electric car sales, and maybe Norway isn't as cold maybe as Alberta as well, right? So I don't from the research, from what I've seen, it's okay. But like,
Yeah.
do you have an electric car? Do you know if it's?
I don't. My friend does, and they say that their electric cars, the batteries seem to drain really fast because of our weather. Plus, we don't really have the infrastructure for charging yet. As well, the government needs to start,
Right.
paying into that because we don't have the superstructure that the United States has. So
Does she run out of gas? Does she run out of mileage when she's driving, or she just has to charge every night?
She has to charge every night. Yeah.
So, but the reality is with the average, so the data is as follows, right? So the average journey in North America and the UK is 40 miles a day. So, like your phone, you don't wait till your phone runs out before you charge it. You charge it every night, I assume. And electric cars, I think, and I have an electric car. Like the pattern I think that people need to shift to is not like gas cars where they charge it or they fill it up when it runs out. You basically just plug it in every night and it charges every night, and then you don't run out. For your longer journeys, obviously it requires more planning, and maybe you need to rent a car instead for those journeys. And like I think we need to shift from a car the way you use it today to like it's a phone really with wheels on it and seats that you need to charge every night, and the problem kind of potentially goes away.
Yeah.
Obviously not for long journeys, but for probably like 99.99% of your journeys.
Amanda, there's a question here that Elaine had. What is your view on social media? It seems to have more negative consequences these days. Will Facebook's metaverse simply exacerbate the negative effects?
Social media. So I don't. That's that's maybe an extreme view, but I don't use any social media other than LinkedIn. So I had Facebook and I found I was wasting my time, so I don't use it. I tried Instagram, wasting my time, deleted it. Twitter, tried it twice, and I was like, well, this is a way, who cares what I'm eating for breakfast? And I don't care what you eat for breakfast, so I don't use it. So I use WhatsApp, not obviously, but I use WhatsApp, Signal, LinkedIn. I don't forward anything on any of those medias. So like on LinkedIn, I would, right? If it's an article or whatever, I do, but like on WhatsApp, I don't forward anything that's sent to me. And then if anyone says, go to WhatsApp, go to Twitter, I'm like, no. And then it's a choice you make, right? So obviously it may have other benefits, and it does have other benefits, but my view is if it's important enough, it'll make the news. And I the 3 news sources that I listen to, and if it's there, then I get it. If it's not, it's okay. I don't really I stopped watching the news during COVID because it's just so negative. So I just like, if it's important enough, someone will tell me. It'll be fine. I found out there was like a petrol queues in the stations when my wife told me, when she called me, she told me there's queues in the petrol station. I was like, huh. So yeah, so I don't do social media. It's just easier. It's just a cesspit of like crap, basically.
Waste of time.
Yes,
Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you. I just have a quick question about like the you said that the renewable energy or solar energy will cost 2 cents.
It does. It already at wholesale prices is 1.35 cents.
Okay. Is it the production or transportation? Because I know that there is a UK company called Links that they will have a farm in Morocco and they will transport through 3,800 kilometer cable under the sea to electrify 7 million houses in UK. So is this price include the transportation as well, or?
No. So PPA agreements, so it's power purchase agreements, are wholesale agreements. So the way it works is you have people that produce power, then you have the grid, and you have distribution, and then you have retail distribution, which would be like, in my case, Octopus. So the price I pay Octopus is 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and then off peak is 5 cents per kilowatt hour, 5 pence, I should say, right? So the prices I quoted were wholesale prices. So for a large, like if you're a large commercial business, you could buy it at those prices. At retail, I couldn't get those prices because at retail you have markup with all the people that are in the chain.
Okay, so it's still economically viable even with transportation and things like that for the end consumer.
Yeah, because so the prices I gave you were all comparable, right? So they're all wholesale prices.
Okay.
So the numbers are like for like, unsubsidized.
Okay.
Right. So if you're a big, like large, you need like thousands of megawatts a year, you can go to a coal manufacturer and say, how much are you going to charge? You can go to solar and say, how much are you going to charge? And then you can go to wind and say, how much are you going to charge? And then there's transport that would be added. So I gave you like the like the PPA, power purchase agreement. So like the at source for wholesale.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Lava, did you have a comment?
Yes, I just curious about local market particularly. And we just show basically a look, it's great presentation, everything perfect. But we have to pay attention what actually what actually presented here for these changes, what companies actually are ready to move to some new direction, and to find out about that will be really good to know, and at least we will be aware where we should go to be aligned with these changes. But if it's none of changes is actually applicable to you, what is your choice actually? You basically have to move somewhere, I guess.
Or do you have to
yeah,
move,
just-
given that we're now working in a globally connected workplace? It doesn't really matter where you are physically based, or at least it doesn't matter as much. But another question following to Slava's, Ananda, how open would, say, a UK employer be to hiring, say, a professional engineer from Canada?
So it's a
I know that's a pretty generic question, but
no, so it's so they would be open, because obviously we hire people in like Africa and India and wherever else, right? The problem is taxes, the tax obligations in Canada, and we don't really have a easy way of like hiring somebody in Canada and then paying their taxes, and then double taxation rules. But the solution to this may be crypto, and then all this problem goes away. But so the answer is yes, open. But the problem to the problem to address is, if I'm going to hire somebody in the UK, so I have a limited company in the UK, I'm going to hire somebody in Canada, limited is easy, right? So you invoice me, I pay you, no problem. You pay your taxes, no problem, right? But if it's a human being without a limited company, then like taxation kicks in and gets complicated.
But it's not impossible.
No, but if you have a limited and then you contract through a limited entity,
Right.
then you then pay yourself and then you do your own taxes. It's not my problem. Then it's easy, right?
Beautiful. There you go, you guys. Your target market just expanded overseas.
Winner. Paul, I think Paul has another question. I'm not fully following the chat because there's a lot going on there. Sorry. We're going.
Yes, if you want to look at the chat first before you.
No. Go for it. It's okay.
Okay. I said, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I like to connect with you. You seem to have a very right. Just a couple of questions. What would be your advice to pure oil and gas companies today? Because I see the bigger players trying to transition a little bit. There's a lot in Canada that are pure players in oil and gas. And where do you see consumption of oil and gas, say 2030, 2040, 2050?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Predictions.
Right. And we're being recorded here, so
Yeah,
we'll see if we're right.
Exactly.
We'll look back 10 years or so.
Hopefully Zoom won't be around 20 years from now. We'll see. So, so I think for companies that are pure oil and gas players, where they think the future is just oil, just energy, they probably have a runway of a good, maybe like 10, 15 years until carbon pricing kicks in and makes them effectively like commercially not viable. So they can either adapt or they'll just go bankrupt. And really like the trigger point is going to be when carbon pricing hits kind of $50, right? That's roughly, I think, my guess, best guess, trigger point. Sorry, I should have known. What was the second question? I apologize.
Oh, the second question is like, because oil,
What do I see?
we have a very large petrochemical industry and we utilize oil for different purposes, right? Not necessarily for power generation, but more or less for fuels, which will probably be going away when electric cars and hydrogen takes a good chunk of that. But where do you see the consumption of like oil and gas, like say 2030, 2040? I mean, I believe there will be somewhat of an industry. That's my prediction, just because of petrochemicals and how we like plastics and things. But I'd just like to get your perspective.
So I think we've passed peak oil already. So peak oil is behind us. But I don't have the data on this, right? So I feel like we've passed peak oil. it will exist, right? Like I think it'll decay slowly, but it won't decay exponentially. So 2030, it'll still be like just as strong. I don't think it'll be zero. 2040, it'll be like in decline, and then there'll be steep decline from 2040 on. Is my guess.
Okay.
And I don't think it'll ever go to zero, but I think it'll be like because some things you probably could never replace, and you'll just pay for the offset.
Yeah, it's a valuable product that still have some use because it's embedded in what we do in every day, right? I mean, I don't think we have, you know, the feedstock, what they call it, to produce plastics from any other thing except some of this coming from hydrocarbon based.
Yeah, but that assumes plastic is going to be around, right? But what if plastic's not around? What if that gets replaced, right? So then,
true,
right? Because plastic is being banned in many countries, right? So like you can't get plastic bags in the UK, for example. So, yeah.
Hey, just when you were talking about your 3D printing of the liver, what was the material it made from?
Well, they were using animal blood in this case, pig blood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was extremely random. I was there to meet my work colleagues, and then this guy brought his son along for dinner, and I was like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "Oh, biophysicist." And I was like, "What is biophysicist?" And he explained. I was like, "Oh, you 3D print organs?" He's like, "Yes." It's genius.
Well, because for my kids, I think they're very techie. So I got
maybe they'll be able to. Maybe they'll eventually be able to 3D print hair, Ananda.
Yeah, that's what I need. I'm okay actually. I've got a nice round head. I was telling this kid, like, effectively, he's solving a problem that doesn't exist yet. Because as we have cars, not even self-driving, but cars that break themselves, that stop like 80% of accidents, and the number of accidents like plummets to zero in the next 5 years. Like organ donation is basically how like the whole industry works, right? So what happens to all the people that are on organ waiting lists? Right? So he's actually solving a problem that's coming. He'll make like loads basically. Albert?
Yeah, very great presentation. A lot of key takeaways. My question was actually in the chat, but apparently couldn't get time to read. So I'll go quickly over it. Just a segue from what Paul was asking. I think there has to be definitely a collaboration amongst governments, corporations, individuals to make sure that this transition to green energy happens very quickly. My question to you specifically is, just as we see today, gas prices are going very high. Biden is asking OPEC to increase production. So there is still a lot of runway for oil and gas. The question typically is how do we make sure there is a balance in our transition as individuals learning to get into the newer green energies? Obviously, also the issue is not about per se production of say fossil fuels, is the issue about the emissions. So yes, there's a lot of work being done here in Alberta for sequestration as much as making sure we don't emit a lot of CH4. What do you think the impact will be in terms of making sure there's a balance in terms of reducing our emissions? Basically, that's what it comes to.
I think, well, I don't know. Okay, I agree. We all have to play our part, but really, like economics is what's going to drive the adoption of newer technologies and the reduction of the old. And if we start factoring in the price of the carbon emissions or even CH4 emissions, then over time, those products or anything that produces those gases, I think will just get priced out of the market. I mean, like, and the governments have a huge part to play in that, right? Because it's like, for example, one thing that we need to agree globally is a carbon price and an international carbon trading market, and that would potentially like then begin the downfall of anything that produces a lot of carbon, like steel, cement, and everything else that hangs off it.
But then wouldn't that just naturally follow that it would be easier to raise money in the capital markets for, you know, these renewable and clean technologies? And
that's already happening, right? It's like if
so
it
hasn't come here in waves yet.
Yeah. Like so here, like ESG and clean tech is like all the craze, right?
Right.
So if you have like anything clean attached, you can get any kind of investment in the UK.
So do you see those companies that have made significant investments over there eventually making similar investments in Canada because they see the opportunity, or is it because they see resistance that they're not already here?
I don't know why it's not yet in Canada. But the investments are being made by like large, like hedge funds, VCs, pension funds, right? And they're the people that are buying those companies or investing in those companies are saying they want to spend money on clean tech only. Like literally, they only want to spend money on clean tech. So like those companies really cannot buy Shell, BP, anything like that. So from the groundswell, the interest is clean tech. And so if you're doing anything to do with like clean tech, like in Silicon Valley or in the UK, like funding is super easy right now. Like
I think that definitely that is the mindset of institutional investors who are going to shift things around. And also, I think the young generation is also coming up with the idea that they will put their money behind green techs. And that definitely will definitely swing things around. But obviously, it has to do with so many facets coming together, whether it's government policies, because when the policies made, even at COP26, there's a lot of disagreement as to who does what, right? So
no, correct. So let me quickly look at the. Sorry,
Elaine has a question here. What do you see as the main pros and cons of cryptocurrencies in terms of their adoption?
Oh my gosh, that's a whole different topic, no? That's a whole different session.
Maybe we'll have you back for that.
Yeah. So I could talk crypto. There's lots of different kinds of crypto, right? There's Bitcoin. There's like 1,000 different cryptos. Ethereum, Solana. So at a very macro level, you could argue crypto is basically the demise of nation states, because it's basically like the first time we have currency or hypothetical currency that isn't backed by a nation and isn't tied to nation state concepts, right? So if you read like Sapiens by Harari, he talks about like nation state as an imagined reality. And so cryptocurrency or any form of cryptocurrency really is the first time we're heading in that direction where it's not backed by a nation but has value. So it could be the beginning of the end for nation states. How about that for an answer? Have I missed anything else in the chat? Sorry.
One last one here.
Sure.
It is from Karen Roberts. Karen, would you like to ask the question yourself?
Sorry, it wasn't so much a question as a comment with respect to all the talk of clean technologies, these advancements with AI technologies, and that there's still a need for natural resources. Even solar panels use coal in their production. Wind turbines require steel. Metallurgical coal is required for steel production, and based on my understanding right now, there's not an alternative for that. I think they've tried different things in producing steel, but nothing as produced a product as good as what metallurgical coal does. And if you're using steel for things like your high-rise buildings because you want to increase density instead of having urban sprawl, you don't want your buildings falling down because they don't have the strength in the structure. There's still, like, in terms of looking at all of our devices, especially what we've been using for the last couple of years with respect to our computers and working in a virtual world. All my devices I look at, most of them require or have been produced in some way with petrochemical products, whether it's plastics or vinyls. The inside of my vehicle is largely made of vinyls and plastics. When I got hit on the bumper of my car, I discovered, oh, it's all completely plastic as well and has to be totally replaced. Our houses are waterproofed with plastic barriers that are wrapped around them. We have asphalt shingles on our roofs. you know, the whole petroleum product aspect, you know, it's so embedded in everything that we have around us and all the products that are manufactured that we use. I think there's always going to be some, or, you know, there's always going to be demand for those products. We can look at transitioning to other forms of electricity generation, moving away from coal-fired generation plants or natural gas producing plants, and we can focus on the solar, the wind, even the nuclear, and you know, most of these things will work for some areas, but you know, they're not going to work for everywhere. I would imagine in the northern portion where they're in darkness for several months of the year, if you have relying on solar, you're going to need a huge storage capacity to be able to get you through those dark periods. And with all of the other technology like electric vehicles and charging, I see the demand for electricity increasing exponentially. There's more and more reliance on needing electricity for all of these other products.
Okay, so I guess, so there's a number of questions in there. I'm just looking at time here. Are there alternatives to, for instance, petrochemicals in your view, Ananda?
I mean, everything Karen described sounds like a business opportunity to me.
Right.
I would start up a business, like I think you maybe described like 10 different businesses you could start up in your statement there. So go for it.
Janelle, could we just get you to ask your question? I think it's a very relevant one for us non-engineers here. Even though I know you're one.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Really awesome presentation, Ananda. And I'm an engineer, but you know, I've been considering pivoting into less of an engineering technical role, and maybe more into a coaching or, you know, an Indigenous relations role. And so, you know, my question to you is for people that are not in a highly technical role, are not engineers or, you know, chemists or, you know, whatever, in a very technical role in the energy sector, like how do you see technology and AI and all this machine learning stuff, you know, affecting people that are in roles like, you know, psychology or social services or coaching and, you know, facilitating and, you know, more of those heart-based human connection type of roles in our society?
I mean, AI I see as being assistive, actually. Like, so I don't think AI in the next 10, 15 years is going to be as empathetic as humans can be. So I would go like long on nurses, for example, right? Because I don't think AI could really replace nurses, but I would go short on doctors because I think a lot of what they could do could be done by AI. So the role I see AI playing in a lot of this, which is, this is actually being tested in Japan, just I don't know, not intentionally, but in Japan already, is can AI, like they have these robots, because they have like basically the oldest population in the world, right? And they don't have very many young people. So what they have in Japan is they have these robots that basically provide company to like old people who need companionship. And so I can see like a positive role where like AI could be assistive for like the roles you described, and also for like, you know, like in this age of loneliness, as we live longer and our kids are doing whatever else they're doing, and you don't have as many kids, and there's a lot of people in the UK don't have any kids anymore as well, as being assistive where we just don't have the labor, or assisting the labor that we have.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, when you said you were talking about like one of the problems maybe of technology is sort of I was talking about Silicon Valley, one of your slides, is sort of like, what about the ethical use of technology? Like, so do you see like people that have been in these roles as possibly being an important part to help keep ethical uses of these technologies, like the sort of conscience of technology, if you will?
100%, right? Like pretty much like in any tech company, and like look at Facebook, for example, right? Like the lack of ethics is part of the reason where, you know, why they have some of the problems they have today, right? Because there's no one there bold enough or assigned to that role to challenge some of the ethics of the things that they have tolerated and are doing.
Yeah.
So like I didn't put it in the slide, but like I have a slide that basically says, you know, what are the 4 big things? You know, people used to ask me like, what do you think will be employment in the future? And it's like entertainment, exploration. I forget one of the E's, and then the last one is ethics. Like 100%. Right?
Okay.
It's
well, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's room for someone like me.
Yeah, for sure. It'll definitely.
How do you see entertainment figuring in to that?
So if you look at if you look at the last 100 years, there was no e-gaming. People didn't have time to game. People didn't have time to do tourism because we're busy. We're working, and you know, things took time. So now some of these industries are multi-billion-dollar industries, right? Tourism, e-gaming. Like this guy Marshmallow ran a virtual concert on like I can't remember the platform, like I don't know, Roblox or one of those like virtual reality things that the kids play, right? He had like 15 million viewers.
Yeah.
And so what do we do with what do we do with our free time, right? With our free time, historically, what we've done is we've traveled, we've gone to shows, we go to like movies, we entertain ourselves. And so entertainment, like if you're on the other side, obviously COVID-19 has been special, but if you're on the other side of delivering entertainment.
Where do you see the future of leisure travel then?
It'll continue, right? It'll continue.
Travel?
Yeah. Travel will resume. Like people like exploring. So it will resume. I mean, planes, I didn't talk about planes, but we will need cleaner planes as well over time. And there's companies that are working on like battery powered and solar powered planes. SpaceX, you know, one of the things that they have in their hypothesis is, you know, we can take you from London to Australia in like 2 hours, because we just take you above space, across, and then down. And you don't have to do a 24-hour flight, and it'll be clean as well.
Forget about Vegas, you guys. For 2 weeks, we're going to go to Mars.
Mars.
Right.
Sure.
Okay, so I know that I'm just sensitive to time. Ryan here has a quick question. Is there a chance that technology could mask and even exacerbate the issue of our world's exponential population boom?
There is actually no exponential population boom. So if you look at, so sorry, Ryan. So the average number of babies we need to have, right, is 2.1, and at 2.1 we run what's called a replacement rate. So you could then maintain a population if you're having on average 2.1 babies. What is happening right now is we are under that number in most countries, including China, which effectively means your age population goes from this to this. And by 2100, so in the next 80 years, the population of the Earth is expected to reduce. We're already decelerating and will shrink from 2100. So there is no population boom. It stopped ages ago. And the reason the numbers goes down, so the average number of babies that we're having is going down because women are getting educated, women are getting into the labor force, they have more independence, they have more freedom. So the number one thing that drives the reduction in births is women in education and educated women. So I don't think technology is masking anything. This is nothing to do with technology. Like technology obviously helps because you don't have, like, you know, you have longevity and everything else, but there's no exponential population boom.
Okay,
and you can look this up. So our world in data, you can look this up, right? Our world in data and population growth, and there's a graph that shows you the population growth. It stops in 2100.
Interesting.
What's the other E for education? Yeah, so it's entertainment, ethics, exploration. Yeah, it wasn't education. Empathy. So it's like nurses and stuff. So like empathy as in like, so actually it's what, like partly what Janelle was talking about, right? So fields that require high empathy, which robots and machines
the computers can't do. Yeah. Okay, I think we've got one final question. Paul, do you have your hand up, or is that from before?
No, I did. I guess my wife, who's been listening to you, was very impressed, and she says she saw that I think the next COP27 is in Egypt, and I think you were mentioning that your portfolio, or you're really looking at Africa, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she was like, she says, tell him I'm Egyptian and I can help him out.
Okay.
So connect with me.
Definitely.
She has a lot of very good contacts, and I don't know.
HR, isn't she, Paul?
Pardon me?
She's in HR at one of
And
the
she's in HR, yes.
big accounning firms. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. I will. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Any other questions, you guys? It is we've kept Ananda. Probably he's going to be missing out on some beauty rest tonight.
Sorry, don't worry.
Give him for an hour here, you guys, on Q&A. Are there any other last-minute questions? Ananda, I think the consensus is that people want you back. So we're hoping that you're going to be willing to come back and speak to us.
Yeah. No problem. No problem. I can talk about this topic, or I can talk about like financial freedom. Obviously, I can't give advice, but I can talk about financial freedom as well.
And
Or health.
that would be
Any one of those 5 things I put up, I can talk about.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Ananda. We are sincerely grateful that you've stayed up so late to present to us and provided us with this jaw-dropping information. I don't think there's anybody here that hasn't learned something significant. So there you guys, we have our 2 hours, 2 out of 5 hours of learning just from today listening to Ananda. There you go. Just 3 more hours to go this week.
Brilliant. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Have a good
Thank you,
day.
Anand.
Thank you.
Have a good
Very
one.
good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, Ananda. We'll be in touch.
No problem. Bye.
Bye-bye.